हेलो बच्चों, क्या हालचाल? बढ़िया एकदम। आज हम लोग के साथ हैं वन ऑफ द वर्ल्ड्स ग्रेटेस्ट फिजिक्स टीचर ऑफ आवर जनरेशन, प्रोफेसर वॉल्टर लुईन सर। एंड आई एम श्योर आपने वॉल्टर सर के वीडियोस तो देखे होंगे। एक इंसान बड़ी सी पेंडुलम को लेके अपनी लाइफ को रिस्क पे लगाता है जस्ट फॉर द लव ऑफ फिजिक्स। ना जाने इंडिया में कितने लोग ने डायलॉग कॉपी किया, फॉर द लव ऑफ फिजिक्स, फॉर द एल्योर ऑफ फिजिक्स, बट नाउ वी हैव द ओरिजिनल पर्सन जिन्होंने ये टाइटल निकाला था। जो इंसान पेंडुलम के ऊपर बैठ के ये बात प्रूव करना चाह रहा था कि टाइम पीरियड ऑफ पेंडुलम मास पे नहीं डिपेंड करता। ऐसे महान व्यक्ति आज हमारे साथ जुड़ने जा रहे हैं। एक छोटे से प्यारे से इंटरव्यू में शेयर करेंगे वो अपने लाइफ के एक्सपीरियंसेस, अपना फिजिक्स के लिए प्यार और इंडियन स्टूडेंट्स के लिए उनके पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू। सो हियर वी आर स्टार्टिंग आवर इंटरव्यू विद द ग्रेटेस्ट प्रोफेसर ऑफ आवर जनरेशन, मिस्टर रिस्पेक्टेड वॉल्टर लुईन सर। हेलो सर। So, sir, first of all, welcome you on Physics Wala platform. We are so delighted to have you with us. It's a it's a pleasant surprise. It's like a blessing in disguise that we have the greatest professor of our century, Mr. Walter Lewin, sir. Sir, we are really motivated by your lectures. I'm really inspired by your teachings. I have seen your videos in 2013, 2014. So, the first question is, Walter, sir, people know you as a great professor. But what are your roots? What are your childhood memories that led you up to here? What are your struggles in the childhood? I have read something about this on the internet already.
When I was 4 years old, on May 10, when the Germans attacked the Netherlands, and that, of course, changed my life and the life of my family and of everyone else in Europe, for that matter, for about 5 years. The war broke out on May 5, 1940. We were very scared at home. We didn't know what to expect. People were afraid that the Germans would use gas. So I remember that my mother, my father, my sister and I would go to the bathroom with wet towels in front of our face. That would have been useless anyhow, but we didn't know that. What came later changed my life in an extremely difficult way. My father is Jewish, my mother is not. My grandparents were cast in Auschwitz. My aunt was murdered in Bergen-Belsen. My uncle was murdered in Buchenwald. It is not possible to even try to tell you how that affected the rest of my life. Even today, my wife, Susan, who is with me here in the room, is Jewish. I am half Jewish. There is not any day that we do not talk about the war. So let's not talk about it anymore. As far as physics is concerned, well, my interest in physics really started in high school. So I think I have probably answered your question, or not, then.
Sir, I have read something about this, but it's really full of grief. The story is full of grief, but let's get on to the lighter part, on the inspiring part. Sir, after this kind of dark childhood, how have you been inspired by science in your childhood only? How you got interest in science, how Walter Lewin is made? What happened actually after that dark childhood? What immediately happened that shaped up you towards साइंस, किस तरह से सर आप साइंस की तरफ मूव करने लगे इतने डार्क चाइल्डहुड के बाद?
Well, the choice for me to get degrees in physics was a negative choice. Many of my viewers will be surprised by that.
Negative choice.
The reason is the following. The kind of high school that I attended was science oriented. You can also go to a high school which is language oriented. Mine was high school oriented. And when you pass the national exam, which is the same everywhere in the Netherlands for science high schools, then any university has to accept you, but you could not go to medical school because you went to a science high school. For a medical school, you would have to go to a Greek and Latin high school. So I had the choice to study math, physics, chemistry, maybe also biology, but I'm not even sure about that. I couldn't think of myself for the rest of my life as a mathematician. Certainly not chemistry, because for me, chemistry is remembering. And I'm very bad at remembering things.
Yes.
Physics is not about remembering equations. That's what many students think, but it's not true. Physics is about concepts. So I chose physics because I didn't want to choose maths or chemistry. So it was a negative choice.
Sir,
little did I know then that I was made for physics and that physics was made for me.
True, very true. Sir, this is called option elimination in a multiple choice question, that you eliminate option. Okay, I don't have to do chemistry. I don't have to do mathematics. What is left? That's physics. Very interesting to hear that, sir. Sir, I have read about this, that you were doing studies or doing undergraduations in nuclear physics. But when we search you on Wikipedia, we find astrophysics. So how does it happens from a nuclear physics degree to an astrophysicist? How does this transition happen and what inspired you?
Okay, excellent question. I think I understood the question. Yes, my PhD was in low energy nuclear physics. And my supervisor was Professor Albert Wapstra. It was not unusual for someone who does not go into the industry, but for someone who likes to pursue research, to go abroad, to leave the Netherlands for 1 or 2 years. And so my supervisor wrote a letter to Professor Rossi at MIT and independently to a professor in Chicago. And he said, well, is it possible that Walter Lewin got his PhD here, could be a postdoc in your group for 1 or 2 years? Both Bruno Rossi and the professor in Chicago said, yes, he can come. Now, when I went to Bruno Rossi, no nuclear physics. Bruno Rossi was one of the inventors of X-ray astronomy that had been invented only in 1962. And I went there already in January 66. So it was at the birth of X-ray astronomy that I entered that group. Almost anything you did in X-ray astronomy turned into gold because it was brand new. So by sheer luck, I chose the right thing. And within half a year, they offered me a professorship. So I wasn't even a postdoc anymore. And I never left. And in those 43 years that I was on the faculty, I have published about 450 articles in referee journals about X-ray astronomy, neutron stars, black holes, X-ray binaries. And so I never changed that field, of course. Nuclear energy was that was behind us, also to speak. I mean, nuclear energy already existed for almost 100 years. X-ray astronomy only 4 years. So the door to X-ray astronomy was wide open.
Sir, but I think that period you are telling, it's somewhat related to the first manned moon mission also. Is there a story behind this?
Oh, I was already at MIT. It was 1969. First man on the moon. It was July 20, 1969. And I came to MIT January 66. July 20. Never to forget. For 2 reasons. One is landing on the moon. Second is an attempt on Hitler's life by von Stauffenberg, which almost succeeded. That was July 20, 1944. So July 20 is a very special day in my life for more than one reason.
Wow, that's amazing to hear, sir. Well, actually, I wanted to know about this time period only. Sir, this question is a bit of kind of a trick question, maybe. I think so. It's a trick question that, sir, you have inspired a lot of students. You have inspired a lot of teachers. We all know that you're born for physics, you live for physics. But how actually you fell in love with physics? How actually it happened for the love of physics? How it happened?
How were you in love with?
Yeah, how do you fall in love with a woman? It's similar. I mean, it is a chemical reaction that happens here.
Yeah.
And you can call it a disease when you fall in love.
True.
But in the case of my love for physics, I was never able to cure that disease. It's in my blood. It is in every cell of my body. As I told you earlier, I didn't realize until I started my studies at the university in physics, I didn't realize that I was made for physics. But I even believe that physics was made for me.
Physics was made for me. Sir, a bit of physics was also made for me too. थोड़ा सा part मेरे को ही मिलेगा. I have seen your video. I have seen your last video of MIT, and you told that you practiced that lecture about 8 times. You call it dry running, and you make several dry runs before delivering a lecture. How does this impact your teaching? Why is it necessary to have so many dry runs? And what actually works, sir? We want to know what the concept behind so many dry runs. Dry run means उसी को बार-बार practice करना, मतलब पढ़ाने से पहले खाली रूम में practice करना.
You asked that question because you are a teacher yourself.
Sir, we want to know more about it.
The secret to any good lecture is obviously preparation.
True.
The reason why so many lecturers, including at MIT, are terribly boring. They have their lecture notes of last year. They walk into the lecture hall, they open their lecture notes, and they start reading. Immensely boring. So, yes, to a large degree, the success of my lectures is due to my extreme preparation. So extreme that you better not tell your professors in India because they will be upset. I will tell you how I prepared. I would start thinking about the concept of how I would present a certain lecture already half a year before I gave that lecture. Then I would start slowly making a scenario. I wrote down some notes. So I was starting what I call building a house. A lecture is a house. If I felt that I had a reasonable house on paper, I would dry run that about 2 weeks before my lecture in the enter lecture hall. empty lecture hall, everything I
lecture.
would, the demonstrations, every word, including turning the lights on and turning the lights off, everything. In general, I would overrun my 50 minutes. So I would have to do some surgery and cut out some stuff. I would then 1 week before my lecture, again in an empty lecture hall with all the demonstrations, with everything you can imagine, I dry run it again 1 week before the lecture. I then, in general, had to make a few more changes. And then you can ask my wife. She's sitting next to me.
Yes,
at
yes,
6
yes.
a.m. At 6 a.m. in the morning of every lecture, I would dry run again for an empty lecture hall. At 6 a.m. of the day of my lecture. So by the time I gave the lecture at 10 o'clock and the same lecture at 11 o'clock, it became a performance.